Hello, everyone, and good day. Welcome to eContent Live for May 16th, 2014. This is a really special edition of eContent Live. We are coming to you from Jonesboro, Tennessee, the world headquarters of storytelling. This is the International Storytelling Center, and today we're going to be talking about the art of digital storytelling. To do that, I brought along two friends of mine who are experts at storytelling. Why? Because they tell stories a lot. And one is the executive director of the International Storytelling, Kiran, Singh, Sirah. We're so glad to have you.
Thank you. Good to be here, Josie.
Josie, Jose. I know. It's my secondary nickname. Then we also have Brad Eshbach. Brad and I have been friends for a long time. He works up in Chicago with a digital agency and is also the founder of the
first social network for space.
Yes, the first social network for outer space, which is really cool. So Brad, we're so glad to have you.
Yeah, thanks. Good to be here.
So we're going to be taking questions. We will be taking those through Twitter and Facebook. Again, I love that Google Hangouts keeps changing their functionality, and so for some reason the Q&A is not working again today, but that's all right. We like it. Google, please don't change it between now and the next one. But to start out with, I wanted to share a couple of stories, and each one of us is going to share a little story or two and why we think the power of storytelling is such an important thing for us all to use, not just in business, but in our lives. So to start out with, I wanted to share a little story, and then I'm going to ask Kiran and Brad to share a story as well. When I was a little kid, I found out this story about my grandmother. Some of you heard my stories about my grandmother, Martha Lou Castillo. And she moved to Florida with her kids when my grandfather passed away in Mexico City. And she decided that she wanted to learn how to fly. Now, this was post-World War II. This was in an era when women were not supposed to be getting their pilot's license. And also, there were a lack of planes. So somehow she found in Florida one little Cessna airplane and a gentleman who was willing to teach her how to fly. So they get in the airplane, they go up, they're learning how to land, how to taxi, how to take off, and she goes through her first lesson and does brilliantly. She's well on her way. The instructor's like, you're going to be an amazing, pilot. You're going to do great. And so they're coming in to land at the end of that session, and right as they get right down close to the runway, a sudden downburst of air forces the aircraft down onto the runway. Bam, they slash down, and it bends the landing gear of that plane. And in that one moment, she effectively destroyed the only plane in the state of Florida that she could learn to get her pilot's license on. So unfortunately, she was not able to get her pilot's license. But she went on to do amazing things the rest of her life. So stories like that capture us, that tell a little bit about who we are, that share a life lesson, or that are simply entertaining. Those are some of the things that we're going to talk about today, and I would ask, Kiran, why don't we start with you?
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about why storytelling is such a powerful thing for you.
Okay, well, storytelling, as you say, I'm not an expert storyteller. I am a storyteller, but we all tell stories. I train more as a folklorist, so the idea that I collect stories. So I see stories from the power of storytelling as something that transfers traditions, ancient traditions, brings it to the present, but we use that to help inform our future. Now, an example of that is here at the International Storytelling Center, we have what produces the National Storytelling Festival. It's the world's oldest public storytelling festival. It's the place that gave birth to the idea of the professional storyteller and the idea of storytelling festivals across the globe. But around that time in 1972 was something happening in my life. I wasn't born at that time. I was born in 76, but I was born in the south coast of England. So what happened in 1972 was that my family were expelled as political refugees from Uganda. And they came from Uganda to England in the middle of winter. They escaped violence. They were told if they didn't leave the country within 3 months, they'll be executed, along with 30,000 other Ugandan Asians. Their parents came from India. They left as migrant workers to build the railroads. Now, one thing they did when they came to Britain is that they couldn't bring their personal possessions, they couldn't bring their temples, they couldn't bring their objects, their money, their bank accounts, their gardens, their flowers, their gold, or anything, their idols or whatever. But one thing they could do was bring their stories. So I grew up with greatest storytellers in my own family, my grandmother, my parents, my dad. But these stories, for someone, a child growing up as the first non-white person born in this town in southern England, I lived in two different worlds. But these two different worlds were where I got to use these stories as part of shaping my identity and what became my greatest weapon of non-violent communication. I could fight off racist slurs, thugs. I could help to shape my own sense of identity. And as I grew up, I became a high school teacher. I moved to Scotland. And in response to, in 2001, when there was after 9/11, the impact of 9/11 across the globe, there was an attack on a mosque and a synagogue in Edinburgh where I lived. And so I brought together around 6,000 people of different faith communities, Jews, Muslims, Christians, Buddhists, Sikhs, Hindus, and we came together to tell stories because it was a sense of solidarity in a space where no matter what was going on around the world or in our own communities, we could use storytelling to bind community. And so I see story, and I talk about that as what I believe as the greatest conflict prevention tool this world will ever know. Why? Because stories has been the most prolific tool to create divisions and war and persecution in our world ever since we've been able to tell stories. So it's how we use stories. And I think it's not just stories about just using stories, we use them wisely. You know, and I went on to work with the Northern Ireland government and worked a lot with people coming out of paramilitaries in Northern Ireland, people coming out of the 30-year war that hadn't really spoken to each other or understood what connected them as Christians. And so we use biblical stories or stories of faith or stories of community to see those connections as parallels. And it was part of the healing process. And so hence I came to America to do some of this work and worked with some UN agencies and was based in UNC, and I studied folklore and international development. And then I got offered the post to come here to run the International Storytelling Center, but really to explore how stories is really the greatest peacemaking tool. The idea of when we bring 10,000 people together, or 2 people together, or 3 people together, whether you tell stories on a front porch, in a classroom, with business leaders, donor recognition, in churches, from a pulpit, it's the sense of community that you have. Ever since people have been telling stories around a fireplace to telling stories in a boardroom, as what will, wherever there's going to be listeners, there'll always be storytellers. It's what forms relationships and community. Mm-hmm. And just to illustrate something about how powerful and how long we've been telling stories, I'll show you 2 images. You can't really see that very well, but you can probably work out it's a cave painting, and it's actually an Aboriginal cave painting from Australia, but you can see 2 human figures. To this image, which maybe Jose's, which is what was inscribed in the 1972 Pioneer probe that was what inscribed in the probe and is now actually just leaving the solar system. We are telling the human story visually on this process because it's how we make sense of who we are, where we come from, and where we want to go. And when we meet people, whether they're extraterrestrials or strangers or neighbors, it's so important to tell your story because it's what binds us as family and community.
That's excellent. Thank you so much. And I think that ties right into, Brad, a recent story that you've had. Tell us a little bit about storytelling.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I'm most excited about is telling stories and just sharing moments in the digital or the social world. Is it allows you to really break down these kind of really large, complex, gnarly subject matters into more digestible chunks, and it lets you take a story that you might have to tell in one point in time and be able to spread it out over a long term. So it's really the same way that you kind of build a relationship with a person. You don't meet a new person and they tell you everything about them. You learn that on an ongoing basis. You create that character in your mind. And you can do that now with being able to tell these stories on an ongoing basis, not in a 30-second ad every 6 weeks, or in a lot of the other ways that we've been forced to tell brand stories or just professional stories. being able to tell them and being able to break them down into more understandable chunks. So I've always had a passion for space in that I think space is cool, but I'm also really bad at math. So it's not like I could ever go to space or add anything to NASA or any of the international programs. But I've always was fascinated with these pieces of content, these individual moments, sound clips, photos, videos that just immediately become kind of cultural touch points, JFK speeches and you know, moon landings and things like that. I've always been fascinated by the moon landing moment where collectively as a country and really as a world, we came together to witness what was essentially 10 minutes of really blurry YouTube video, right? And it impacted us for decades and decades still today. You ask anybody that was alive to see that, even if they were 2 and have no memory of it, they want to tell you that they were there. And now we have the ability to tell those stories every day. The same amount of content that we pumped out from that blurry black and white camera in 1969 comes out every single day through Twitter and through other platforms that these astronauts are using just because of the technology they have. So that's kind of the genesis behind where the idea came from of how do we create a platform, kind of the first social network for space, all this amazing content and thoughts and insights that are being pumped down by these people that are currently floating around in low Earth orbit. How do we share those with the largest amount of people? So originally the idea for the site, which is how many people are in space right now.com, just simply tracked who was up there. Because a lot of people just being able to dumb down something as complex as space travel, manned space flight into, it's a simple number. It's not about the trajectory it takes to get out. It's not about the science or the engineering that's required. It's about just the fascination that, yes, we sent people up in 1969, but there's pretty much consistently since then been humans in space. And just that is a powerful thought. There's 3 people up right now. There were 6 earlier in the week. The most there's ever been at a single time is 13. And that's all about to change in December when we start having private companies that are sending people up. So we're really on this precipice, this kind of tipping point of what it means for humans to go into space. And it's taking it from scientists and the odd teacher that qualifies to be an astronaut and really taking it down. First round will be the billionaires that have the 250,000 to spare. But while it's being limited to who can actually go into space, they are able to share that experience in such a deep and rich way that I think it can almost give us, I'm hoping that it can give us a lot to the points you're making, Kiran, is this collective overview effect of no matter what the trials and tribulations we have in the borders and the countries and the cultures and the religions of the planet, we still can maybe raise above that and think there's a thin line that's really separating us from everything ending. You know, we are on this planet together, and it's a very fragile ecosystem. So that was kind of the genesis for where coming up with this site that just tracked the ongoings and the kind of the sharing of content from space. So yeah, last week was really excited because there's kind of been a division between people that go into space. The Russians and the Chinese and the Eastern Europeans, the Ukrainians, very rarely will use any social platforms to share stuff, especially none of the like Facebook or Twitter. The Americans and Europeans will all the time. Almost all the astronauts have Twitter accounts. But this week, from space, Oleg, one of the Russian astronauts who's actually still up there, he's been up there for about 50 days, signed up for Twitter while in space and then tweeted about our website. So it was kind of this Truman Show moment of where they realized they were on camera. Not that they didn't realize they were being watched, but it was really, we are introducing this as the first social network for space, and our first 6 members really saw it yesterday. And it's really cool just to see how the wonder that goes into people's eyes just when you ask them a simple question, how many people do you think are in space right now? Most people have never even thought of that, but then what do you think they're doing? Who are they? How long have they been up there? What are they excited about? And just to be able to share that through your mobile phone, I think is really powerful and takes this thing that we've been doing since 1969 of telling the story of sending humans to space, but we're able to break that free of a really blurry image that you're just kind of having to take at word of what this is on the moon, and now being able to really show from high definition streams to photos being shared to Google Hangouts, all from space. So I think I'm really excited about what is that storytelling opportunity over the next few years as we start sending regular people to space.
What's cool about that too is it boils stories, I think, are containers for lots of other information. And what I love about how many people are in space right now.com is that when you pull it up, it's just a number. And it's right now that number is 3, and that number has all this other information that's a part of it. So storytelling can be such a way to simplify things and say that number 3 tells a vast story. And when you click on it, then it slides down, and there's 3 names of 3 astronauts with the flag of their country. And that's what I love about the website and about storytelling in general, is that you can simplify all this vast information into one thing.
Yeah.
And I would ask you guys, what are some ways that you see storytelling being used to simplify, a sort of massive, complex thing? Are there examples? Are there things that you've seen in the marketplace or not in the marketplace that are good examples of how storytelling can do that? Either one of you have an example of a story to share about that?
Yeah, I could say, I'd say a couple are. I think Google does a really good job of telling the story of the impact of their products especially through their commercials or videos that they release. They release from time to time. They've done a fantastic one for Google Fiber that was really the story of a little boy who had a terminal illness, was stuck in his house, basically couldn't leave his house due to his immune system, and his dream was to throw out the first pitch at a major league game. And so Google was able to, through the connectivity power of their fiber, set up a robot at a major league stadium and set up him at home to be able to control that, and he was able to walk or roll out to the pitcher's mound and throw the pitch, get his standing ovation, have this really powerful, ephemeral, visceral experience that really told the story of not, hey, here's how fast our product is compared to fill in the blank competitor, but really here's the impact that when you remove those barriers from connection, what can take place. And they do the same thing with their Gmail ads, showing how you can tell the story of your child growing up through Gmail. And they just released a new one for Google Glass, where you watch the first 2 minutes of it, you don't even know what it is until the end of it. It just kind of hits you across the face, like, oh, that's the power of this product. That's the promise of what Google wants to bring and how they want to push humanity forward. So it lets you say some really heady things, but in a grounded way through just telling a simple story, showing the impact rather than trying to sell on the specs.
Yeah.
I don't know about particular products, but there's a few ideas that came to mind. Which one was the Google Doodle, which I think is a fantastic initiative, where you just click on the Google Doodle and you find out about this person in history that no one else has sort of known about, or their Sochi Games Google thing, which I thought was very clever, subtle, but it had an impact. Things like the Moth as well. Our friends at the Moth, where people, I don't know how many people know what the Moth comes from. The idea of the Moth was the moth that sat on the southern porches and listened to the stories of people telling stories on front porches, and that's the idea of the Moth. But it takes some time when you start having a discussion about it. You don't always have to be so obvious. Here's a Starbucks thing that's changed over time. If you look at this actual logo and how it was like 20 years ago, they used to have, but they don't need that because it's a recognizable symbol now.
Right. That's and that that idea of Captain Starbuck and the mermaid and the sea and all those things have been baked into that identity over time, and that's that power of a mark that tells a story.
Yeah. There's one example. I don't know, just a kind of a personal story. I don't know, but I like this one. One of my best friends was traveling around the world, and we said that we were going to meet up somewhere in the world, so we decided we're going to meet up in Saigon, Vietnam, and she was traveling through Cambodia, Laos, and I was flying from Britain. But I had to stop off in Bangkok. And so I remember walking past McDonald's in Bangkok, and you see the logo of Ronald McDonald, but the tradition is that anyone that goes, the tradition when you're in Thailand is that you always bow and you put your hands together. So there's Ronald McDonald outside McDonald's doing this. I thought it was really clever, clever sort of marketing, but, subtly telling a visual story and what's this about, and it's about. But then also when I went into Vietnam, I noticed the only sort of American chain of restaurants that's very successful in Vietnam, the one I saw anyway, was KFC. So I was asked to write an article anyway about museums in Vietnam, but then I started looking at, why is KFC so popular? Then I looked at, okay, Colonel Sanders, Ho Chi Minh, they share the same birthday, I think, but they're definitely born in 1860, the same year. If you look at Ho Chi Minh and Colonel Sanders, they look very, very similar, right? They both have red for different reasons in the background. And if you go to North Vietnam, it's almost like they've, oh, I don't know, this is just a theory, so I don't want to be sued by KFC. But I think the figure has been slightly distorted to look like Ho Chi Minh, because people are going to think, oh yeah, our hero Ho Chi Minh, let's go and eat KFC.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's maybe somehow just the power of how you can sort of tell stories visually, through imagery, through historical figures, and have these mascots, these mottos, these kind of people that lead you into some type of story. You see what I mean? So
Yeah.
there's lots of peacemaking ways that peacemakers are using stories in really clever ways. And one Pakistani woman that I met, she's using sort of traditional Pashtun and sort of Urdu and Punjabi sort of folklore from Afghanistan and Pakistan, and using mobile technology and using folk tradition to tackle some practices, bad practices within villages, conflict resolution practices, and she sends it out virally, and kids from those villages and elders pick it up and then share it in those villages, and it challenges some conflict tensions between villages. And so I thought she was really good, and the art of how messages are put on these trucks and artistically painted on these trucks that go from across Afghanistan and Pakistan, but they're peace messages, So I thought that was an interesting way of using storytelling, using folk tradition, using poetry, and using an existing sort of tradition, but using it to sort of build community and tackle as an innovative tool to build peace, basically.
What's interesting to me is I think a lot of companies that are stepping into more storytelling and better storytelling have realized that we can't push a product, come up with a press release, market something, etc., unless we really know the heart of the listener and our intent as well. How do we want to engage with them? And I see some of the best brands, companies, individuals, people that are communicating well with others have figured out the intent and the heart of the listener, and then the intent and the heart of the storyteller. Brad, I know you're working on several different projects and have seen other projects out there. How would you envision, or how do you see some of these really knowing the heart of the person that's listening, but also knowing the heart of the person that's telling? What are some examples or stories that you've seen of how people are doing that well on either side?
Yeah, I think there's one thing that I think is counterintuitive, and I guess I can use an example from one of our brands, is a Leinenkugel beer, so a Miller-owned beer, and it's been brewed 147 years, same place, Chippewa Falls. It's like an 8,000 people city up in northern Wisconsin. Just really iconic, nice. This brewery is pretty much the center of the community and has been for 147 years, one of the oldest breweries in the nation, and still run by the fifth and sixth generation of the family. Like, it's this amazing heritage story that you can't even make up, like even if you were trying to. And the real problem as they're expanding, or not the problem, but the opportunity as they're expanding, is how do you tell that story outside of the North Woods, outside of Wisconsin and the Midwest, where it's already known? When you come down here in Tennessee, people can't even pronounce it. So you can run ads and you can introduce it, but you're still trying to shove 147 worth of heritage and true stories into 30-second ads, or billboard placements and radio spots. So being able to, the counterintuitive part in the social and digital, it's all real time, it's all now, it's all reactive. But you really, when you're telling those big stories, it's about slowing down. It's about spreading it out, and it's about telling it on an ongoing basis. So it's finding smart ways to break that story down and tell it as you would tell someone if you were teaching a whole semester about it. There's no reason to speed it up. When you have that many stories, you want to be able to find different ways to do it. And with the number of platforms that we have now, it's really interesting to be able to play with what's the purpose of your personal or your brand's Facebook, and what's the purpose of Twitter, and what parts of the stories are you going to tell? Do you want to tell the real kind of emotion-driven, pull at your heartstrings family stories, maybe on Facebook? And do you want to do the more stuff that's driven by funny anecdotes and try to get conversation? You might want to do that on Twitter. If you're trying to show in the action, if here's the fifth and the sixth generation of the brewery, just down, boots on the ground, working and sharing Leinenkugels with the community, you might want to share that through Instagram. So it's finding specific ways of what are the kind of, as you said it earlier, Jose, the containers of that you can tell that kind of story, and almost kind of templatizing that. So when you're trying to figure out how to tell these stories, we need to tell the origin of the name of this beer, or how did the family get to this point. You kind of have a toolbox to choose from. Well, we can tell it this way on Facebook or this way on Twitter, and just understanding of having kind of what tools you have to tell that story, and then being able to spread it out and tell it over time, I think is super powerful and lets you really get down in there, and each of those pieces of that story can speak to individual audiences. So that's I think it's actually makes it easier to tell these big, complex, long stories where you're normally forced to narrow to the 3 bullet points that you really want to dive into. And so that's what excites me about it, is just not letting any of the great stories, the content fall through the cracks.
Gotcha. Kiran, I got to ask, this is a fairly new position for you at the International Storytelling Center, and to have a traditional storytelling festival that's been going on for years and years. And as storytelling has, over the last 5 years with social media and all these different platforms, has just exploded. Lots of different ways to tell stories, as Brad was saying, which containers you pick, etc. So as you guys are moving forward with the festival and with the center, what are some of the things that you're doing to build that? Are you looking at other storytelling avenues? What are some of those thought processes that you're having as you're building the festival and the center?
Well, yeah, I suppose I'm coming into a tradition. I'm coming into a tradition that goes back 42 years. Everyone from Pete Seeger to Alex Haley to have performed here, to Doc McConnell, to all these people that people know about roots. And when Alex Haley was here, he said, without storytelling, there'll be no roots. And so there's all these people that people know about, the impact of the festival, but we haven't been so good as an organization communicating what has come out of that. The fact that we might bring 10,000 people here for 3 days, but the impact to the economy is $8 million. That's how many people from the gas station to a little girl 10 years old out there made $500 for her local school by selling soda pops. She's the only person I give a free ticket to. She gave me a water bottle, and she wanted my swatch, so we swap every year now. It's like she gets a swatch and I get a free water bottle. We do it's a business transaction.
It's perfect.
And she gets a free ticket to the festival. She's the only person to. So, but it's so the things that we're doing. So many people tell me about how did they find out about the festival? How did they find out about Jonesboro? What a place to come to! A little town in the Smoky Mountains. How is it the capital of storytelling in the world? It's a big, bold statement to make. When people talk about how they listened to on the radio many years ago, Kathleen Windrum telling a story, and they were like, who is this person? How is storytelling? There's an actual festival about storytelling. Or the Appalachian storyteller, the great mountain man Ray Hicks, that was the first person to come down, tell these stories that he told around the family, and only within this community of family. He told it was a tradition where he told stories, and some of these stories that go back to Scotch-Irish diaspora, isolated in a community of mountain cultures, came to the festival and told on a hay bale just 100 yards from this building. 80 people came there 42 years ago, and then it expanded, and then he was asked to go to the national festival, and then it kind of exploded. And it also exposed this culture that was existing in this region of the world that many people only understood through the Beverly Hillbillies. It was demonized to some extent. It was made fun of. But then here what we had was that people were telling stories, and it opened up other ways of seeing the cultures of this region. So some of the things I'm interested in is that very few people now, or less people, are watching TV or maybe listen to the radio, but listening in different ways. But more people might be tuned to social media. So we've been working now with a partnership with Google, that Google came here a few weeks ago and took 90,000 images of this center. In 3 months' time, they're stitching it together. And just like they've done for the Taj Mahal and the Angkor Wat temples in Cambodia, it's this panoramic multimedia type view, so you can go from Google Earth, go from space, come into Jonesboro, come right through the roof of this building, and you can take your own tour of the center. That would go directly linked to a multimedia exhibition that's 42 years of the milestones of all the things that happened from Ray Hicks in 1972 right up until this year, where we're going to have Anita Norman, who's 15 years old, and she's going to be the youngest ever storyteller performing at the festival, but she's the national champion for Poetry Out Loud. And so this kind of contrasts to slam poets that we hope to bring, that are working on collecting Syrian refugee stories, turning it into slam performance, to the story slam. It's moving into different genres. But we know that when that goes live instantly to 8 million social media followers. Not only that, is that we can build on that with our 65,000 audio collections at the Library of Congress, and we want to make this digitally accessible across the world as an educational resource. So when we ask kids to come here and schools, not just that everyone can visit or have a storytelling experience, but they don't have to actually come to the festival. A child in Liberia, a child in Ghana, a child in Southeast Asia can visit every day, have a learning experience by visiting our website or coming online and getting some materials that helps them set up festivals in their local community in Eastern Liberia. You know, that's the purpose. That's the purpose, is using story to enrich people's lives, but it doesn't mean about necessarily coming direct to a festival. You can, but not everyone can do that. So very much using kind of like the power of social media, but in a way that really promotes the opportunities to learn, have resources, download resources, and connect storytellers from across the globe.
Yeah.
You know, we're really much on this live, authentic experience.
Right.
Because there's things when you're in the moment, you can do that digitally.
Which we're doing right now.
We're doing it digitally. And I think that using digitally is as a tool to be able to enhance what you do. I'm dyslexic. I've never been able to write stories. When the computer came about, I started writing. I became a teacher and I started writing stories. It changed my life. So it's just how you use the tool, right? How you use the tool. And there's things when you can have story swaps from across the globe, or conversations. But and it creates communities. And maybe it's digital communities, but hopefully in a way that enables conversations to happen. So that's what we're doing, and we've got projects with the Smithsonian and Peacemakers and a whole bunch of stuff going on. So
I love it. I love it. That's so cool. And it's awesome to see too about what you said about authenticity, and that to me really rings true, in that there's something innate in humans that we have an ability to sort of see through a lot of lies. And sometimes you can fool people, but you know, there's this authenticity that happens, particularly when you see somebody's face and when you see their body movements and you watch their eyes, which is why it's really exciting now when we're in the the digital age, where we can have hangouts and FaceTime and video chats where you can start to share those stories around the world. And it's a lot harder for somebody to lie to you when they're looking you in the eyes and face to face.
And to that point, just the threshold for truth in your storytelling is because the BS filter has never been more attuned as a culture, and especially younger people. They've just grown up in this world where they're being deluged with messaging, and they're very good at sussing out what's a true story, what's a true someone trying to share something with me, and what's someone trying to convince me of something, or trying to push me in one direction. So just that really, it's you have to be cognizant that you have to be telling something authentic, and to hopefully an audience that at least kind of cares.
Yeah. That's the truth. Well, we're real quick to wrap up. Brad, why don't you tell us a little bit about any projects that are going on, where people can find you online, and how they can connect with you.
Oh man, I guess you can just go to bradeshbach.com if you want to find links to all my various profiles. You can check out the space app, which is, you can go to howmanypeoplearainspacerightnow.com, go ahead and bookmark it. You'll go back today. And then if you can't remember that, you can go check out People in Space app, which will be the app website. So app should be live in the next 2 to 3 weeks. There's another launch. People are going up into space on May 28th. So get excited. And then this December, Virgin Galactic will start sending people up. So it's a big year for humans in space. So.
Yes, it is.
And you can follow along with the official app.
I love it. And this was another story too. I don't know if you saw this, but there's was it a Japanese energy drink company that is putting a capsule of their powdered energy drink up on the moon. They're actually going to send, and it's supposedly going to be the first billboard on the moon.
Hey.
And it's starting a little controversy about, oh my goodness, they're putting an advertisement on the moon. It's supposed to be part of one of the first, the Virgin Galactic.
Yeah. It'll be interesting, because there's going to be a race of brands going to, because used to be, if you want to send something into space, you had to buy your own satellite, or you had to, piggyback on the back of something. You basically had to become friends with an astronaut and say, would you take this thing to space for me? But now with all these private satellites and really low-cost satellites and now private industry going up, there's going to be a lot of opportunity for, at first for brands to just put stuff in space, but then to kind of use that in a way to kind of do some really fun stuff. So it's exciting.
That's it. Kiran, tell us a little bit about anything that's going on in your life and where we can find you online.
Well, I'll be hiding. I hide in the office. No, I'm kidding. I am here, so if people want to connect with the International Storytelling Center, just get in touch. We've got a website, all the social thingies, Twitter and all that.
What's the website?
Storytellingcenter.net.
Storytellingcenter.net.
If you just Google International Storytelling Center, it comes up. Mm-hmm. But yeah, this summer there's going to be a lot of projects launching. The Google project should be launching around August, September, the digitization project, some of the audio material, the online projects, the downloadable resources. But I would say there's a lot of work that goes on beyond the festival, and a lot of that's research-based. We've got just got a Gates Foundation grant to bring experts in the world from both peace building and from storytelling coming together for a project where we're going to start the process next week, looking at storytelling and international peacekeeping and policy making. So it's to actually try to influence how we create community across the globe. We're doing a lot of this work. So I would say for people, even if they don't connect with us, connect with a storyteller, or just start telling stories and then come to our festival and perform.
And that's a great point. So thank you guys to both of you, of course, for eContent Magazine. You can go to econtentmag.com. We'll be doing more eContent Live coming up in the future. This year we've got some more fun stuff planned. And my name's Jose Castillo. You can find me thinkhose.com or @thinkhose on just about every social platform out there.
We're going into space, so it's
we are. We're going to go into space. Nano. I would love to go into space. Brad, can you make that happen?
That's my goal. We'll see. I'm not paying. We'll let someone send me, but we'll
awesome.
Knock on wood.
I love it. Well, hopefully you'll see us next time. We'll be doing this live from the International Space Center. So, guys, thank you so much. I appreciate it. We'll see you guys later. Have a spicy day, and thank you so much for tuning in to eContent Live.
Thank you.